All right. Hey, folks. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Cape Cod Maritime Museum's lecture series. We are very happy to have you all here with us today. If you guys have not met me before, if you're new to our lecture series, my name is Elizabeth York. I am the Executive Director at the Cape Cod Maritime Museum. Today's lecture is sponsored by the Mid-Cape Cultural Council as well as the Mass Cultural Council. We're as well as our 2023 corporate sponsors. Those are Cape Air, Highline Cruises, Avangrid as well. So a big thank you to all of them for helping to support programs like these. And of course, you guys are all familiar with this by now, but at the risk of sounding like PBS, it's really worth noting that programs like this lecture today are made possible by support from folks like yourselves. And I really urge you to consider donating or becoming a member of our museum. Your support helps us keep programs like this going, as well as help support other programs and on-site activities we do at the museum. So please consider donating today or becoming a member. So before we get started, just a quick reminder of our Zoom lecture format. Please be sure to keep your microphone on mute and your video off so that all of the attention can be on our speakers today. If you run into any technical issues, please feel free to send myself or Abigail O'Brien. She's a member of our staff. You can send us any questions or concerns that you have in the chat, and we can try to diagnose that issue from this side. Also, if you have any questions for our speakers today, you can type them into either the Q&A, which is on the bottom toolbar, or you can type it into our chat function as well. Both of our speakers will be taking questions at the end, but of course you can ask those questions at any time and they will be lined up for the end of our lecture. So today's lecture today is presented by Deb Whitehorse and Henry Bosset. Deb grew up above her father's iceboat shop in Monona, Wisconsin, and Henry Bosset's first sailing experience was in M16 Scows. So he moved on to the E-Scow Fleet and eventually started crewing on offshore boats from 24 feet and up. And Deb is the longtime secretary of the Four Lakes Ice Yacht Club in Madison, Wisconsin, and a member of their honor roll. Nice, Deb, cool. She's also the secretary and treasurer of the International DN Ice Yacht Racing Association, which is the world's largest ice sailing class. Henry is a three-time DN Ice Boat World Champion, as well as claiming the North American and Eastern Championship honors in the DN, MScow, and Tornado classes. So Deb and Henry, take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. I'll share the screen. Okay. All right. Henry, do you want to maybe talk a little bit while I figure out the screen sharing?
Sure. Okay. We're happy to be here. Deb wears many hats, as was just told. She's a race committee most of the winter in various places, including overseas, to help get us our races done. She works with the E-Scow class to have their website work well, and so she's right in the center of things in Madison, Wisconsin. And we'll be mentioning the White Wings and Black Ice website from the Hudson Valley, which is a really good site, but iceboat.org is right up there. If not, they're both the best that you can get to, iceboat.org and White Wings and Black Ice.
Okay. All right. Can you see is the screen sharing?
It came up before.
You had it up perfectly just a few minutes ago.
It did, yeah.
Okay. Oh gosh. Now where did it go? Sorry. Why isn't it sharing?
This wasn't a very good ice boating season. The weather, or not the weather, but the climate is getting to us, and we're basically going further north and getting fewer days in ice boating. So it's kind of hurting our sport, just as a introduction to what we're facing, as well as the rest of the world, with, if you believe it, some type of global warming or climate change. But we do travel for that reason, and some people are starting to move to Maine from New Jersey and elsewhere in order to have more time ice boating.
The sharing isn't coming up on the Zoom screen. Let's see.
I'm gonna make you a co-host so that you can find it easy.
Okay, yeah, the toolbar was not there.
Any luck now?
Okay, there we go. All right. I'm gonna escape here. Oh boy. Share screen.
I'll mention also that land yachting. Oh, here we go. Great. Thank
Okay. Here we go. Okay, I don't have the speaker notes. So anyways, welcome to the exciting world of ice yachting. Thank you, Elizabeth and Abigail, for hosting us. And I'm Deb Whitehorse, who's fumbling with Zoom. Apologies for that. Henry and I will walk you through a lot of the history and what's going on now in the world of ice boating. Again, they mentioned I'm with Four Lakes Ice Yacht Club in Madison. Henry's out of New Jersey. I'm also the webmaster, longtime content manager of iceboat.org, which has been around since the Stone Age of the internet. So this is a couple of photos that are a great contrast. What has changed over almost 175 years of iceboat experimentation and development? Not the sailor's expertise, inventiveness, or passion, just the technology which has allowed for a safer as well as faster and more exciting sport. So we have at the top of that photo are two stern steerers from in New Jersey, about 1903 or so. And the bottom photo are two Class A skeeters from the regatta near Madison in 2023. And what ties them together is both of those pictures show the latest state-of-the-art technology in ice sailing, with the stern steers at the top back in 1903, and then the Class A skeeters. What is ice boating? Well, somebody wrote in 1908, an implement of pleasure, propelled by the wind, possessed of a devil, and managed by a maniac, from which we escape by the skin of our teeth and a special interposition of providence. The Dutch are credited with inventing ice sailing, although it wouldn't surprise me if somebody thought of it before, the 1600s. The Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam has a great collection of Dutch illustrations and paintings that feature ice boating. This one's from 1611, and what they would do is take their soft water boats, they put a plank and some skates on them, and they had themselves an ice boat. A lot of them were used to deliver things like, bakery, bread, and so forth. And Henry?
The first ice boat in North America was built in 1790, or so the tale goes. And in 1898, Scientific American Supplement, H. Percy Ashley stated that he had the pleasure of examining a set of runners built by Mr. Oliver Booth in 1790, which are still intact and well preserved. The problem with that date is that Mr. Booth was born in 1823. This is H. Percy Ashley's drawing of an ice boat of 1790. It's from the 1904 Encyclopedia Americana. Ashley wrote the full ice boat entry and credited Oliver Booth with building it. His drawing and reference are primarily cited by writers on the history of ice boating. Percy's an interesting but somewhat troubling individual in the history of ice yachting because he was a bit self-centered. A son of George Buckout in 1947 wrote, "All his plans were copies from my father's boats." In spite of that observation, Percy published many good articles on the current developments in ice boating, as well as many plans of all sizes of ice yachts. He was also an accomplished marine model maker. Several non-ice boat models can be seen at Phillips Academy and the Peabody Museum in Salem. I believe there are permanent exhibits, but this was from a 1948 brochure, so if you're interested in going, check first. The Southwick family at Poughkeepsie, New York, are the other figures in the early history of ice boating. 4 family members are cited as the first builder in various magazine articles or newspapers. Willett in 1790, Zadok in 1807, Henry in 1812, and Edward in 1833. Henry Southwick has the most firsthand Poughkeepsie accounts, saying that he built and sailed the first ice boat. So my money's on a fellow Henry, no matter the year, but not 1790. 1879, a Daily Eagle subscriber said, Henry Southwick, when about 16, would sail downwind on the ice on a hand sled. He then had 3 large skates made. I was living at the lower landing previous to 1830 and sailed on said boat many times. If anyone has any doubt, go to the tannery of Southwick and Company to see the beauty. In case there is good ice, bring on your crack boats and give the old veteran a try. 1896, in the Evening Enterprise, they said the first ice yacht was built in Poughkeepsie in 1790 by Henry Southwick. That has an interesting spelling of Poughkeepsie, but apparently it was spelled many different ways over the years. 1896, in the Eagle News, it says that an Eagle reporter visited the old Southwick storehouse and saw the queer-looking craft made over 100 years ago. Everything but the sail is there and well worth the walk to see. It is still owned by the Southwicks, with no first name mentioned. Those newspaper articles are interesting in that they talk, almost 100 years later, of the boat still being in existence. And so it would have been something to see, I'm sure, at that time. Sorry. Here we have 2 first-hand accounts of early ice boating on Long Island by ingenious farmers spending their time in the winter having fun. From the diary of Daniel Hildreth in January of 1837, he says, "We had a sail to the beach and up to the Hayground Bay. She works like a charm. The wind blew a gale, and we went part of the time a mile to the minute. The weather had been severe for a long time, and the ice some 2 feet thick in places." Again, this is directly from the spelling in the diary. And again, from a diary of Tom Halsey, his great-great-grandfather. Tom's a DN ice boater out on Long Island, from January 18th, 1859. Tuesday, the weather rather cold. Today's winds northwest. I and the boys on the pond with ice boat, wind rather bitter. Nathan and John on the pond ice boating. And in the lower right, we see the actual rudder assembly from that time, rudder tiller steering assembly. New England's, been in the history of ice boating well as early as the Hudson Valley was, although, much of the development occurred up the Hudson Valley, as the Dutch spread up that way. From an 1821 Boston paper, the river Acushnet, dividing New Bedford and Fairhaven, is a mile wide and has been crossed on the ice, however incredible it may seem to you, in 1 minute in what is called an ice boat. In 1827, from Fall River, Massachusetts, Captain James G. Bowen proposes to run an ice boat, which will be novel to our citizens, being the first ever built in this place. 1831, the Providence Journal describes an ice boat invented by Captain George L. Brown that has been plying our harbor at the rate of 30 miles an hour, the ice far from being smooth, but had it been that kind known among skaters as black duck, the speed must have doubled. That's an interesting term in that we call new ice that is perfectly clear and therefore it looks black, black ice. And so I wasn't able to find any other reference, maybe one, to black duck back then. Yep. And this is pretty amazing to me. In 1844, from the New Haven Courier, the harbor is closed up 5 or 6 miles out from the city. Ice boats running in every direction, down toward the lighthouse, back to Long Wharf. It was estimated yesterday that she ran at the rate of 50 miles an hour. Why will not some hardy adventurer try the experiment and run down to New York in a couple of hours? Now, if you go to New Haven and you're in by the city, along 95, you can just see Lighthouse Point, which is shown down at the bottom, the lighthouse out here. And to think that that was all frozen to the point that they could ice boat on it is pretty incredible. Next. So circa 1859, Jamaica Pond in West Roxbury, Mass. Was very popular for skating, and an ice boat can even be seen in the background, blown up on the right side here of the lithograph or whatever it is there. In 1858, from Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper, we have the quote, "Skating is the most exhilarating and delightful of all our winter pastimes and exercises. Beautiful and delicate girls who shiver on ordinary days now forget these flower-like sensibilities at these winter courts of nature." There's a lot of chauvinism in the writing of the 1800s for sure. Next. So here again, now we have Dorchester in 1875, and it says the iceboat regatta will take place from Black Buoy to Half Tide Rock and return, a distance of 3½ miles, entries free to all. Again, when you look at the map, I'm not sure where the Black Buoy was, but certainly was in by Dorchester, and we can see still Half Tide Rock. And to think of that whole area being frozen just boggles the mind again today. 1886, whoops, one second. Yeah, it's 1886 from a Maine newspaper about the Kennebec River, and again, a bit of chauvinistic put in here. And the pretty girls prefer a dash over the glare ice to a sleigh ride behind the fastest Maine trotters. Again, they always enjoyed getting out on the ice, both skating and sleighing. There's many pictures of sleighing. They had horse races, all sorts of things. They were out there enjoying the weather and enjoying being on the ice. Next, sorry. Okay, so here we are, climate change, global warming, no matter what you think or want to call it, our sport is being changed by our warming Earth. Ice boaters are traveling further from home for fewer days of sailing. It used to be we'd get skunked 1 year out of every 10 or 1 year out of 20, said John Spur, an ice boater since 1982 and treasurer of the Hudson River Ice Yacht Club. What's happening now is we get 1 good year out of every 8 or 10 years. There's just no more dependable ice in the Hudson Valley, and the problem is global warming. In that little article that I've quoted there, he also mentioned potentially moving up to Maine so that you could enjoy the sport more often. The picture in the bottom is the British yacht Britannia leaving her dock at East Boston, February 3rd, 1844. A canal having been dug in the ice 7 miles long and 100 feet wide. The ice was 7 feet thick at the wharf and 2 feet thick for 7 miles out to open water. She was followed by cheering citizens in sleighs and sailing boats fitted up with long blades of iron-like skates. Again, it's amazing to think of how much ice there was at times because of the colder winters that would occur just a bit more often. Next. The cold storm and the great freeze of 1857 prostrated New England during the winter of 1856-57, one of the worst ever. 32 snowstorms dumped more than 6 feet of snow on the ground. Fierce winds created drifts as high as 18 feet, and it got so cold the mercury froze in thermometers. And again, we have a picture in the bottom of people on the ice in Boston Harbor and trying to help the ferry move out, I guess, out of the harbor. Next. Again, 1856 souvenir of the coldest winter on record. This is the Delaware River at Philadelphia. Again, in winter, whether there was ice or not, people were outside. And looks like we had thousands of people on the ice. It was so thick near Philadelphia on the Delaware. Next. So now we get to some inventive New Englanders. Here's a 1893 improved runner invented by Mr. Charles K. Bradford of Linfield, Mass. In the bottom, going down there, this ice boat on Lake Champlain appears to have that runner. It's shaped more like a hockey skate for maneuverability than a long, flat speed skate for going faster, but it's innovative in how the flat center section will help on snow while the two blades work on perfect ice. So again, normally our runners are much flatter than this, and they come to a 90 degree. They don't have two blades on the side like this picture here. And so he did have a good idea, and it probably worked quite well for him, but it certainly wouldn't be something you would want to race with. Next. Now we talk about rigs a little bit. In 1885, Mr. Borden of Fall River, Massachusetts, invented, and again, that's a loose term because there were others before him, and before him in particular, invented the lateen sail rig. That account says he rigged 2 hickory saplings for masts, bending them to meet at the top. Later on, it was adopted in a more complete form on the Hudson and the Shrewsbury. Actually, the Canadians, as shown by the painting at the left, were using a sunfish-style lateen prior to 1850. In fact, that was the favored rig in Canada, and their rig was, again, like the sunfish rig, where you had just a mast going straight up, and the sail hung off of it like a sunfish sail, whereas the other 3 rigs we see here have 2 masts, so to speak, holding the rig up, and that became the standard in North America. Next. There were other unusual early developments related to ice boating, including snow sailing out in the far west, where they got snowed in all winter. Someone came up with the prairie yacht. In 1887, a Dakota citizen has invented a new kind of prairie schooner, or rather snow yacht. It will comfortably carry 20 persons and go the speed of 30 or 40 miles per hour. He even wrote in there that they hope to form a yacht club the next year to gather more participants. Next. Now in 1926, Carlisle A. Lincoln of Wayne, Maine, on Androscoggin Lake, had the first rotor ice boat. Now, rotor power works because of the Magnus effect. You'll have to Google it. Seriously, the cylinders are rotated with a little engine and create lift in one direction. The photo at right shows 4 rotors in use, and it appears to be carrying wind turbine blades also. Now, obviously, it didn't catch on, and I'm not sure even today, if we used our modern materials, if that's the right device to go fast. But he proved that it could work on an ice boat, and nowadays it's being proved that it can help the efficiency of cargo ships crossing the ocean. Next. Early ice boats generally had either 3 or 4 runners, skates. Here we see examples of a 4-runner and also a 5 and a 6. 3 was finally accepted as the most efficient. To the left there, we have a sketch of skaters on Peekskill Bay on the Hudson by Benson John Lossing during his travels in North America circa 1860. And a 4-runner ice boat is shown there with the skaters. On the right top, we have a 5-runner ice boat titled Man Overboard. And down below, we have a Schuldum 6-runner ice boat circa 1883 that kind of took the whole idea a bit too far. Next. Popular early Eastern ice boating sites out of Poughkeepsie, New York, and this is far from complete, and I'll just quickly go through it, are the Shrewsbury River at Red Bank and Long Branch, New Jersey, Orange Lake, New York, Lake Champlain, Vermont, Havre de Grace in Maryland, Satellite Pond, Brooklyn, New York, Upper Mystic Lake in Medford, Mass., which was very popular around 1900 and on, Sachem Pond on Block Island, and they still ice boat out there, or up until a couple of years ago they were able to. Shelter Island, Long Island, and I'll mess this up, but Cobbessy County, Maine, Lake George, New York, Easton's Pond, Newport, Rhode Island, which was right there in town by the beach, just north of town. So again, being so close to the ocean, it's fun that it was able to freeze in. Now, how much fun was ice sailing in 1856? At Greenport, Long Island, per the New York Times, filling those boats with merry girls on a moonlight night when the wind blew strong. There were jolly times as we read of, but don't see every month. Now, the picture on the lower left are ice boats on Prospect Park, in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, and the headline was, "The Great Ice Boat Race will take place on the Satellite Pond, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, on Wednesday afternoon, admission 25 cents. And again, they also played baseball and other sports on the ice. I'd love to see the baseball played on it, as well as a contest in which they released a pig on the ice, and the person who could catch it won a prize." Next. Now, rig-wise, there were many different types tried in order to find out what would be the fastest. And here we see essentially 5 rig variations. On the left is a cat rig, similar to you'd see in the summer on a cat boat, no jib. Next, we have two main and jib gaff rigs, but one on the left is a high peak and the one on the right is a low peak. Then we have this little boat, which is called the Mosquito class, with a cat rig, and those were generally built by young adults with materials at hand, including references to their mom's bed sheets. And finally, we have a lateen on the right. Plus, I missed it before, but right in the middle, we have looks like a young adult with a skate sail. Skate sails came in many sizes and varieties, but they were very popular in the late 1800s, and Lake Apacong in particular became quite famous for the Lake Apacong model of skate sails. Next. Here we have the North Shrewsbury sailors felt lateens were faster than the main and jib rigs, and in fact proved it for a while, and adopted them almost exclusively for a number of years. The Scud and the Dreadnought were two examples that turned out to be very fast in heavy air, but suffered greatly in lighter conditions. Shrewsbury sent them up to the Hudson to challenge for the ice yacht pennant of America, but they never won. On the right here, you can see that experiments were also made with all ice boats, with using either steel or aluminum in the structures to hopefully be stronger, or hopefully also lighter. They also tried it in the hulls sections, but eventually all those experiments failed. Next.
Okay, now we come to the Icicle, which was owned by John Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's uncle. He was the first Commodore of the Hudson River Ice Yacht Club, which was founded in 1885 at Poughkeepsie. His prestigious ice yacht, called Icicle, required a railway flat car to transport and was the largest ice yacht ever built. Back in those days, sail size equated to engine. The bigger the engine, it was thought the better. But that really didn't turn out to be true. It won, I believe, three titles?
Three,
Henry?
yes. Yep.
Yeah. And it was, let's see, 67 feet long, mast 29 feet, boom 42 feet long, and bowsprit 25 feet long. I believe this is still the largest stern steer ever made. The Deuce, I think, is about 60 out here in Wisconsin. And again, the best source for the Icicle to learn more about Roosevelt's stern steers in any Hudson River ice yachting is the White Wings and Black Ice website by Brian Reed. Do you have anything to add to this one?
Well, just the two pictures. The picture on the left is the original Icicle, the largest one. And then John Roosevelt realized, in particular, when a boat called the Robert Scott came downriver from Athens to race against the Poughkeepsie people and beat them, he realized that something had to be done. And so he then, it took a few years, but he modified it to a smaller boat shown on the right. I think it was only about 8 feet shorter, but significantly less sail area, shorter boom, etc. And the Robert Scott basically upped these current boats by using wires to attach the rear of the boat to the runners to keep the plank from twisting. The original Icicle and other boats like that were what they call side rail boats, which used wood out to the plank to do that, and thus were much heavier and therefore ultimately slower once the Robert Scott type boats came along.
And then we come to Jack Frost, another very famous Hudson River stern steerer. It was owned by Archibald Rogers. The Hudson River flourished as an ice sailing center of North America until icebreakers kept the river open for shipping. And there's a famous story that FDR used his presidential influence one time, at least once, to request that the icebreakers delay so that the ice boat races could take place. Jack Frost was more famous than the Icicle because she won the most trophies. Let's see, she was a 5-time winner of the Ice Yacht Challenge Pennant of America. We've referenced that a few times, and I just want to say that the Ice Yacht Challenge Pennant was and still remains. It's the Super Bowl of ice yacht racing. The Indy 500 trophy. It is still raced for. It hasn't been in a while, and we'll discuss it in a few more slides. The Jack Frost is still maintained and sailed on the Hudson River. It was rebuilt by members of the Hudson River Ice Yacht Club in the early 70s and relaunched on Orange Lake in 73. She is just under 50 foot in length and carries around 750 square foot of sail. And that's from Brian Reed. And Henry, did you have anything to add?
No, there's just a clear view of the stays to the plank in this view on the right-hand side. Later on, I think we'll see one side rail version, but again, that lightened up the boat considerably to get rid of all the wood and just have the stays.
And here we have some photographs from the FDR Museum. Let's see. Oh, so Franklin Roosevelt had his own ice boat called Hawk. It was built by George Buckhout of Poughkeepsie, and George was the hottest builder of the 1800s. FDR's mother bought it for him as a Christmas gift in 1901. And so from 1901 to 1904, he sailed it and raced the Hawk on the Hudson River, chiefly during the years he was a student at Harvard. In 1941, he donated Hawk to the National Archives and Records Administration for exhibition in his newly constructed presidential library adjacent to his Hyde Park, New York estate. And you can go there today and see it. Then there's the Whiff. The Whiff was a very influential boat. It was built by George Buckhout, who we referenced many times. It was a catalyst for a new style of ice boat. It was exhibited and built for the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial Exposition, which is a pretty big deal back then. People from Madison visited the exposition, and they saw the newly designed ice boat. And they brought back his ideas to Madison and built some boats after that design. If you see the nameplate on the lower left, there's a family in Iowa that has one of George Buckhout's original boats. And I took that picture on Lake Geneva a few years ago. And let's see, Henry, you could probably talk more about the Whiff and why it was so different.
Well, again, the main thing was that Buckhout did his best to make it state-of-the-art as far as construction at that time. So, again, it was a side rail boat. You can just barely see it in the left-hand picture at the Centennial in the machinery building, I guess it was. It barely sticks out, but at any rate, he used the best woods in the various parts of it. He used runner designs that he had come up with, and it was intended to show the world how great our ice boats were and our technology in building them was. He took everything, considered everything, including putting an eagle at the front of the boat there. You can see in the lower right-hand thing, kind of like a bow door ornament like we had on sailing ships. And so it was a beautiful boat. Couldn't be the types of steel, types of bronze, etc., that were used in the fittings were all state-of-the-art. That was the main thing about it, and it did take into account the current thinking on what was the best way to build a ice boat in North America. Deb, do you want to do that, or?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll do the next one.
Okay, well, speed's the thing we're talking about with ice boats, of course, certainly for the racers, but even for the cruisers. When I'm out there racing or practicing to race, I see, so to speak, cruisers crisscrossing around that are just going as fast as they can, hiking up, etc. So we all want to go fast while we're out there. The records have always been looked at as tall tales because of the extreme conditions they were set in and primitive ways to measure. Surveyors, transits, compasses, and wheels were used to lay out and measure courses, while cold fingers clicked stopwatches, while basically they were saying that they were looking a mile or a mile and a half away for a flag to go up, and they would click their watch at that point, and then of course they could see the boat as it came by, but they weren't using radios or anything else to say, okay, it's starting now. They were visually seeing a flag go up. Now, Elisha Price in Long Branch has supposedly established a record of 140 miles per hour. And he did that, as he said, we had a 60-mile-per-hour wind blowing plumb into us when we gained fame in 1908 by hitting 140 miles per hour. It was a Latine rig boat called the Clarelle. Now, we got asked in the last Zoom of, what are the speeds, etc. And I found two things at the bottom here from Bob Dill, who has a great site also on about ice, and everything to do about ice, how it freezes, why you should watch out, etc. So on the right, he's drawn a graph that shows a DN and a skeeter. Across the bottom, you've got the wind speed, and across the left-hand top as you go up, you've got the speed of the boat in miles per hour. So what it shows is that ice boats on good ice, perfect, clear, new ice, almost instantly hit almost half their speed in 5 to 10 knots of wind, and then as you get up to 20, you pretty much start topping off because the aerodynamics start hurting you. And again, it shows the difference that, let's say, in 15 miles an hour or so, and DN is going about maybe 45, 50 at best, while a skeeter is up to about 80 miles an hour. Now on the left, he did a GPS track of a DN. Again, I don't know what the ice conditions were or how good the boat was, but it shows that upwind in a 10-mile-an-hour wind, the boat was going 30 miles an hour, that it tacked at about 90 degrees, which is normal in that kind of wind. But then it went downwind at 40 miles an hour at a much lower angle because you can head down with every puff. So it's a very good representation of just how an ice boat sails. I think that's it.
Okay, and then here we have, here's a record that was set back in, let's see.
1879.
Yeah, my speaker view's covering that up. Maybe you could talk about that, and I'll add if when you're done.
Another reason not to believe everything you hear, of course, just like fake news today, whatever you want to call it. Back then, there was a report in the newspaper of over 70 miles an hour, and if you read through it, extraordinary time by the new ice yacht boat Lucille. It's full of details. It's been rumored among a few of the ice yachtsmen for some time that Captain Winslow was having a boat built that would soon make her appearance and would eclipse anything yet built in the way of an ice boat. Yesterday, while the leading yachtsmen were taking a lunch at the brewery with ex-Commodore Booth, now maybe that tells us something at the brewery, but their attention was directed to a yacht making her way down the river. When she was first seen, she was rounding Crum Elbow, about 5 miles distance, and in 6 minutes from the time that she passed the brewery, going at the rate of 70 miles an hour. Such an excitement among the ice yachtsmen has seldom ever been witnessed. Now, after that appeared, there was another one saying that the Lucille's owner now challenges the world. Well, shortly thereafter that year, somebody researched that and found out that the Times and the Herald had been pranked for some reason, and it was a total hoax. I looked for the name of Lucille as a boat at any yacht club, ice yacht club on the Hudson, etc., and of course found no reference to it. So there you go. You can't believe everything you read.
Right, and I would like to add, so that the tavern that they were sitting at was the Vassar Brewery, which eventually became Vassar College, and so that Vassar Brewery was the first ice boat bar in North America, and it's obviously a lot of fun tales must have been told there, and great ideas like this hatched when they were having a few beers. So what about speed records? Well, the latest land speed record is 138 miles an hour, set in 2022 in Australia by Glenn Ashby of Emirates Team New Zealand, the America's Cup team, certified by the International Land and Sand Yachting Federation. There is no official sanctioning body for ice sailing speed records. So anytime I hear someone say that a record has been set in ice sailing, I tend to take it with a pretty big grain of salt. Ice boats, most ice boats are built for racing and not speed records. It's like the difference between a Formula One or Indy car and a Bonneville Salt Flats car. Now, there are some who have built ice boats specifically to set speed records, but I think other than Richard Jenkins' Greenbird, none have really been that successful. The chances of having the right conditions for a speed record, which would be miles of black ice, no cracks, a little bit of water, perfect wind, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, very difficult. And then to get a bunch of people to drop what they're doing to come and certify, set up radar and everything, I'm sure it could be done if people put their minds to it, but right now we don't have one. Okay, and again, we've been mentioning white wings and black ice quite a bit. Musings on the magic of ice boats. This blog explores the history of the antique stern steers, gaff-rigged ice yachts of the Hudson River Valley. It's an online archive of boats, pictures, races, stories, and historic articles about ice yachting. Ready about, and that's from Brian Reed. If you have any interest in this, please go there. He just does an incredible job. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, it's where I go to research
Yeah.
a lot of things too. Yes.
Me too. It's my first stop.
Yep.
And then we come to some Madison history. Ice boats, ice sailing heads to the northwest. So in 1787, under the Northwest Ordinance, Wisconsin became part of a great territory north and west of the Ohio River, out of which Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin were created. So that name Northwest kind of stuck with us for a long time. There's a famous regatta known as the Northwest Ice Yacht Regatta, still sailed today. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So this is an engraving that was published in Harper's Weekly in 1878. And you can see our Madison, or state of Wisconsin Capitol in the background. That's the one, the first version before it burned down. They put up another one. But you can see everybody on Lake Monona here enjoying the ice, the skaters. And our history here with ice boating, crude ice boats were used to haul building materials for the construction of that Capitol seen in the background and for other things. So we have 4 lakes here, and when you put ice and manufacturing facilities next to each other, a lot of the result is ice boating, just like in Detroit and out east, because ice boats are all custom made and they need people to make the fittings and the runners. So that's why they tend to show up in cities near ice and manufacturing. And so that's how the was that?
I'm sorry, could you back up for a second? I just want to point out a view.
Sure.
So I was talking about side rail boats, and this gives perfect views of those boats which were side rails. So you see there's a central timber, but then there's also 2 diagonal ones that go out to the plank, and that allows for greater size cockpits. And it's why we often saw mentions of taking 16 people and more on ice boats. So again, sorry to break in, but those are side rail boats.
Thank you. And here's a view of Lake Monona again with the Capitol from a couple of years ago when we had the Northwest Regatta. You'll see the big stern steer in the front. That's the Mary B. A group of Madisonians has brought her back and restored her, along with a bunch of other, skeeters, renegades, probably some DNs in there on Lake Monona. Four Lakes Ice Yacht Club was founded in the late 1800s, and our club continues to actively race and build ice boats. I think the last I counted, there's probably 5 or 6 ice boat shops in the area where you could drop in on a Tuesday night and see what they're working on, or any night. On Lake Mendota, there were large rental fleets of ice yachts on Lake Mendota. Near this, owned by the Bernard family, Frank Lloyd Wright grew up a few houses up from this photograph. He was very familiar with ice boats. His school was also right near where this picture was taken, so he would have seen ice boats out sailing around while he was sitting in school. He made ice boat models, and then he also would, even later into his career, when he came back to Madison, he would drop into this ice boat shop, the Bernard ice boat shop, and visit with them. Charles Lindbergh had, I think, 1 semester as a University of Wisconsin student during this time as well. Of course, his ice boat had to have a motor on it. He made it with an airplane engine. And apparently he was not a very successful student, because I think he spent most of his time hanging out with the ice boaters. This was before he made his trip across the ocean. Here we have our different classes of ice yachts. This certainly isn't all of them. On the top left, we have the Class A Skeeter. In the middle, the world's most popular ice boat, the DN. Then we have the Renegade on the right, developed in Detroit. It's a version of a Skeeter, really. Lower left, we have a Yankee, developed by Homer Sider of New Jersey. It's a B Skeeter, very popular boat out east. And then another B Skeeter in the middle is a Bemke B Skeeter developed by Bill Bemke around the Lake Geneva area back in the maybe 50s and 60s. And then another very popular boat is the Knight. It can take 2 people in it. When they race, they only race with 1, but it's a very active class here in Wisconsin. It was developed in Pewaukee, and it's quite an active fleet. And it going into some Skeeter development, the early Skeeters, bow steering boats were called Skeeters. They were single-handed, much easier to set up and cost less, and easier to transport than a stern steerer. So these started coming into use in the 30s, developed around Wisconsin, and they dominate the ice yachting world today. And here, these are early Skeeters on Lake Delavan in Wisconsin. Note that they don't have a springboard, and a springboard is that extra piece that extends from the hull to the runner, makes a much smoother ride. Let's see. The boat with the P on the sail is Pike. This is an open back Walter Beauvais built bow Skeeter that won the Northwest Regatta in '34 with Harry Melga Sr. as skipper, and that's Buddy's father. The regatta was at Gull Lake in Michigan. It was the first time the Skeeters had their own division in the Northwest. And again, the Northwest started as a stern steer regatta, and that information came from Jane Pagel. And next we see some development in the Skeeters. Let's see, from under the boom to behind the boom. Let's see, can you go into that, Henry? I can't see the.
Sure. Well, the original Skeeters after the bow, when they got large like this, you sat under the boom, Now, to mention about the skeeters, the development of those was based on the area of the sail. The sail could be 75 square feet, so you could do anything with the boat, anything with the plank, anything with the mast. So as materials improved and you go taller and taller and still control the rig, the present day skeeters occurred at about 28, 24, 28 feet. So Paul Kruger from Madison had the idea to move the skipper out behind the boom so that the boom could come all the way down to the deck, and also you could see better. So those were that was the new development in skeeters after the standard ones on the left there.
And then the skeeters had one more pretty big development. And Henry, you were there.
Sure. Well, Dan Clapp from the East is not only a good skipper, but a good builder. And so I'll read, the next step in evolution was the front seater bubble boat, so named because of the canopy sealing the pilot in and increasing the aerodynamics of the hull. Dan Clapp, following in his father's footsteps, carried the skeeter development further with his creation named Insanity. By moving the cockpit in front of the mast and adding the canopy, the sleekest aerodynamic package was achieved along with a fully efficient rig. His father was an airline pilot and had one of the sleekest skeeters at the time named Destiny. You could just tell it was fast by looking at it out on the ice. And he had added ailerons to the plank to help control the hiking and also reduce the drag. So he obviously inherited this ability to design and be a good sailor from his dad. And there's not, well, it would appear there's not much more that can be done to develop the skeeter than these bubble boats, except minor, tuning here and there. And Dan has led the way, but the several Madison or Wisconsin area sailors picked up on it and are equally as fast with their own creations. So actually, forward cockpits occurred before Dan came up with his. This is Tom Nichols of the Lake Pacong Ice Boat Club. He developed this sea skeeter in approximately 1978. Now, the other boats we were looking at are what are called either A-class or E-class skeeters, and they're all out. You can do anything you want with them other than go more than 75 square feet of sail. But here, the sea skeeters were capped at a 20-foot mast to try to help reduce the arms race. He first sailed it on the ice, and then he made a conversion kit to sail on land. This was taken at Lakehurst, New Jersey, where he was able to secure permission to sail. His idea, of course, was to get the sail right down to the hull and make it more efficient for the allowed sail area of 75 square feet.
And then speaking of sea skeeters, this is another sea skeeter design by Minnesota sailor Pat Heppert. The limited mast height of the sea skeeter class rules helps immensely to box in the design to result in a boat that is small, lightweight, economical, and easy to transport and rig. Pat has built 2 of these. Daniel Hearn has built 2, and I believe there's some sailors out east that have built at least 1.
Yes.
I guess I think that these may be the boat of the future, just because they're very easy to trailer and put on, and they cost a little less than the A skeeters. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then we have the world's most popular ice boat, and Henry knows a thing or two about these as well. And you can talk about the rigs here and why a bendy rig works.
Sure. Actually, yeah, so on the left we have Jane Pagel, who was a national champion in the class, and she's sailing with a relatively stiff wood mast. And so you can see it's not bending very much, and the boat's up in a hike. On the right-hand side, you see a boat with the mast bending like crazy, and it's just scraping the ice for all practical purposes, although it isn't, that would be slow. So when we were able to have the materials and the permission from the class to change the rules to allow primarily carbon fiber masts, we were able to create a mast that generally wouldn't break, and when a puff hit would bend out itself instead of the boat going in a hike like on the left with Jane. So On the left, you had to let the sheet out to get back down on the ice and be fast again. On the right, it takes very little sheeting or unsheeting to keep you on the ice. Basically, the mast bends however the wind makes it bend, and you just keep going, so to speak, faster and faster. Now, the added effect of the bending mast, if you look from behind the boat, the leach of the sail lines up perfectly with the mast itself. If that doesn't happen, like in summer boats in particular, or most of them, when you look at them from behind, the top of the sail is twisting out away from the center line of the boat, and that's essentially losing pointing ability and some speed. So for the most efficient rig, you want the leach lined up with the luff, and that happens when the mast bends like this. Next. Yeah.
And the DN class held the 50th anniversary of their world championship. The DN class was developed in 1938. They started having the North American Championship, I believe, in 52 or 53. In 73, they became truly international. So Lake Kegonsa in Madison had the best ice in North America during this time. So we had over 100 DN sailors compete at the 2023 World Championship. It was won by North American sailor Matt Struble, who lives in San Diego, but he did grow up in Michigan. And it was the first time in 9 years that someone not from Poland has won. Obviously, the Poles are excellent DN sailors. And then we come to ice boating for kids. Ice Optimists were specifically created as a youth trainer designed to be easy to build using commonly available materials, keep costs to a minimum, uses a standard Optimist dinghy sail plan so that youth sailors can use much of the same equipment in the summer and winter if they sail and race in both seasons. In Europe, Ice Optimist sailing is quite popular with kids. And they have a really well-attended Junior World Championship there every year. And Henry?
Well, so we've been seeing a lot of pretty expensive boats, including the DN, which when I first got into it, it might cost maybe $2,500 to have a really competitive rig. I don't even want to estimate what it is now. It's $10,000 or $15,000 at least to be competitive between the runners, maybe $20,000 for the guys that are winning the worlds. But at any rate, it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be small, easy to transport. On the left here, we have a boat called the Cheapskate that was designed by Lloyd Roberts of Maine to provide a low-cost entry into the sport. It uses the Sunfish rig, which makes it that much less expensive because you hopefully can find somebody with the rig and plop that on. In the middle is a boat called the Icebird, developed back maybe around the 1960s. Again, it's a basic boat, but you do have to make the rig and the sail, and so that brings the price up probably above what the Cheapskate is. And then finally, just to show recent development, and especially in smaller, easier to sail boats, Dan Clapp again has come up with this little boat, which has a solid wing sail on it. You can kind of see a circular thing there below the green part of the wing. You hold onto that and you use that to just, pull in or push out to pull on the air or let the air out. It does have a hinge on the back to put more power into it. But it's certainly more expensive than either of the boats on the left. But compared to owning a Skeeter, if you want to go fast and throw it in the back of a trailer, or a big van, this is the way to go. You can even reef it by simply taking the top section off. So again, Dan has worked to further this sport.
And here we have the Ice Yacht Challenge pennant. It was started on the Hudson River, I believe, by Franklin Roosevelt's Uncle John. It was competed for many years. It was a very prestigious, but then when the Hudson River started losing their ice because of the icebreakers, they didn't have the regatta very often. So a man named Ray Ruge, who was an iceboater, an iceboat historian, helped revive it, and they changed it so that skeeters could compete for it. So Ed Rolberg of the Fox Lake Ice Yacht Club in Fox Lake, Illinois, won it in his skeeter and brought it to the Midwest, where it has remained ever since. It's currently held by Bill Dale and Peter Harkin of the Pewaukee Ice Yacht Club. My father won it one year, along with, I think he was sailing with Bill Madison, and then Bill Madison also won it with AJ Whitehorse in the picture up on the right in 1987. The Stewart Cup and the Hearst Cup, back in the day, a way to get publicity was to sponsor an iceboat trophy. Kalamazoo Ice Yacht Club member asked William Randolph Hearst if he would, donate a trophy in his name, and he said yes. Doesn't hurt to ask, right? And so the Hearst is a very famous trophy that's still competed for, although the stern steerers out here are having trouble competing because they need to have a lot more ice than they need to have at least 12 inches to be able to drive their trailers on and set up. So the stern steerers, they need some more ice out here. And the Stewart Cup was sponsored by a kind of like an Alka-Seltzer type company, and that's still competed for. And then we have the Van Nostrand. Henry knows about that.
Just to briefly move along, it's a famous trophy, again created on the Hudson, and it was basically a challenge to the Challenge Ice Yacht Cup of America. And this is called the Challenge Ice Yacht Cup of America. And it was sailed at Red Bank last in 2003 when Red Bank defended against it. That's a picture in 1978 of boats on the ice racing for it, all stern steerers, of course.
And then we have the Northwest. I'm just going to mention these briefly. Northwest Ice Yacht still raced for, although we need to have ice, more ice for the stern steerers. It's originally their regatta, but there are like 5 different classes sailing in it now. International Skeeter Association Regatta still going strong. It was held here in Madison in 23. John Dennis won it out of Minnesota. And Tom Nichols built a skeeter. And then if you ever get to the Hall of Fame in Newport, there are several ice boaters in the Hall of Fame, all familiar names. And then here's ways to get involved. Get in touch with a local club. Email me, email Henry. We'll get you in touch with someone to, try ice sailing. And finally, Henry can explain this one.
Well, if you're an ice sailor and you don't get enough fun in the winter, you can strap your boat onto a patio boat and go have some fun. This actually just was to learn about a new mast that had come along and how it fit my sail designs. And so these 2 mentors of mine who were great inventors and builders of ice boats strapped my DN onto a patio boat. We raised the sail and turned on the engine and learned a lot about the mast bend and the sail. So it was quite a lot of fun.
Okay. So that's the end of our slide presentation. Are there any questions?
Yes, awesome. That was so fascinating, you guys. Okay. I have a question for you two before we get to the questions from the public. Can you talk a little bit about the construction materials used in the more modern ice boats, like the skeeters and everything? Is it carbon fiber? What's used? Plywood?
I'll let Henry answer that.
Yeah, carbon fiber is the primary, along with some Kevlar also. Kevlar is better in compression, whatever. It bends better and doesn't crack quite as much. So combinations are used, and the steel in the runners is specialty steel, 330, 316 stainless steel alloys, various alloys, which actually came from the medical industry. So a lot of research is put in by ice boaters who don't have quite the resources of Team New Zealand, but we certainly come up with boats that look just as good and go just as fast as
and I
that
guess
land sailor that we saw.
we can't not mention Sitka spruce, which is Very important in airplane building and ice sailing as
Mhm.
well.
Are there kits sold so you can build your own?
No, but that is a really good idea because that seems to be the trend of everything these days. I would look for them in the future.
There used to
Especially
be,
especially the Optimus. I think that would be sort of a good
Yeah. Didn't Joe Norton have kits at one
Yeah.
point, Henry?
Joe Norton at one time had it with the DN, but and so did the Goujons, but it was always difficult to have enough customers to make it work. Things like the cheapskate, the ways to build them are posted online, but then you do have trouble then if you're not a metal worker deciding on the runners, etc. So it's always best to lean on another ice boater if you want to get into the sport, and you have to figure out how. Check out that list or email Debbie or I, and we can put you in touch with somebody in your area who could help with that.
Okay, so we do have a few questions from our viewers today, and everybody, if you have questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A, which is on the bottom part of your toolbar on Zoom, or you can put them into the chat. We had a message from Robert Wills early on during your talk, and he said, Deb, Henry, thanks very much, but I have to go give my own ice boat lecture now. So, sounds like a friend of yours.
I'm sorry that I can't see it. He's a great historian also who has written articles and done many lectures.
Wonderful. And Charles says, I remember the Jack Frost making it to Lake Winnipesaukee Spring Frolics in the late 1990s up here in New Hampshire. And Lake Winnipesaukee is a very popular lake, especially in the summertime, but knowing that there's things that used to go on there in the winter, pretty cool.
In March, in particular, when the season would end in most of our areas, we always look to one last time sailing at Winnipesaukee in what they called the Spring Frolic, and they would also have an around the lake type situation where you would get an award if you made it all the way around the lake and all the little coves and everything.
All right, so we've got a comment or question from Hugh, and he says, it seems that the Western stern steerers are more sophisticated with wing masts and high aspect rigs than the Eastern boats, which are predominantly gaff rigged. Do either of you know the reason for this? Perhaps the longer sailing seasons?
I'll start in quickly. There are wing masts here in the East. Similar to the ones in the West, but not as big. And they evolved. There was one called the Pirate that was very fast. And there were several others. I had one picture that I took out of them, but I don't have the reason for why the Eastern sailors weren't didn't go after it quite as fast and as the Western sailors. Do you, Debbie, have any idea on why?
Well, I have a guess that there was an arms race in stern steer designed to win the Hearst Cup and the Stewart in the Northwest. Maybe that's the reason why. Bigger ice, more ice. That could be because they put a lot of time into it.
Yeah, the trophies are good reasons for sure for people to say, hey, I want that trophy. Yeah.
Good motivation. All right. We have a comment from Tracy. She says, unfortunately, I just heard that Buddy Melga's health has deteriorated. Whatever happened to Ferdinand, the vintage stern steerer that I believe Buddy's father built?
Ferdinand is still in Lake Geneva, as far as I know. I think that boat came from Detroit. Ferdinand the Bull. Yeah, I'd have to look up, but it seems off the top of my head that came with the Deuce out of Detroit, but I could be wrong. But it's still there. It's still down in Geneva, as far as I know.
We have another question. It's, do you have any history of the Lockley skimmer?
I know, obviously I know of the Lockley. I see it out on the ice. That's a boat actually that can potentially still be bought as a product. If you Google it, I think I just Googled recently and actually saw a new name of somebody producing it. So anybody out there, again, looking to get into sport, Google Lockley Skimmer. It is a steel structure boat, all steel, no wood. Some sailors, like to think that that's not a great idea because if you hit a hole, it's going to sink. But as long as you wear, a life jacket, that's fine. And it's a great little boat. We should have included it probably in here. I hadn't thought of that, but
Yeah, it's a great entry boat. To give someone a ride the first time, it's kind of a hard sell to ask someone, hey, will you let this person go in your high performance Skeeter or Dion? And Lockley Skimmers are a perfect boat to give someone a first ride.
Cool. All right. Well, it looks like that is the end of our Q&A. There's no other questions coming in through the chat that I've been seeing. Lots of thanks. Great presentation. Oop, 2 more questions coming in. We've got the hard way on Lake Winnipesaukee is a run from Wolfboro Bay to Center Harbor and back. It must be done within 24 hours. Must be 5 boats minimum in the fleet to qualify. Making it 3 times entitles you to get your name on the trophy, and the average trip is about 70 miles.
there you go.
All right. And so, yeah, that is that. Thank you guys so much. This was so fascinating. Really, really fascinating. Really cool stuff.
Yeah, thank
Deb,
you.
I'm going to come out and visit you in Wisconsin, and we should get... I want to get out in that lolly skimmer there and see what we can do.
Oh, I can hook you up.
Cool. All right. So, folks, our next lecture will be next Sunday. That's going to be May 7th. And it is going to be all about Cape Cod, the cradle of invasion. And this is all about how Cape Cod became the center for invasion training for the U.S. Army during World War II. We also, if you are a Cape Cod resident or if you are living in the New England area and you're looking for something really awesome to do tomorrow, May 1st, is Museum Mondays in May at the museum. So that means that we are open to the public for free all day. And the best part is that at 2 p.m. we have a lecture. It's going to be given by Dr. Alan Granby, who's part of our board of advisors. He's going to be talking about his beautiful book and his research for his book. The book is called Wandering Whalemen and Their Art, and it's a collection of scrimshaw masterpieces. So he'll be telling us all about some of the pieces in that book and his research and everything that he's found throughout his incredibly professional life working as at Highland Granby, which is a beautiful, beautiful location in Hyannis, art and collectibles and antiques. So please feel free to visit us if you're in the region tomorrow. The talk is at 2 p.m. And then for those that like to come see us virtually, looking forward to seeing you guys next Sunday at 2:30 p.m. That's May 7th to talk about World War II and Cape Cod. And Deb, Henry, thank you guys so much. This was really awesome. So fascinating. I am now a big fan of ice yachting, and I really want to try it out.
Thanks.
All right, folks, have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.